So here's what most North American media completely missed this week. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez just told all of Europe something that came as a huge surprise. And what he said mimics almost word for word exactly what Mark Carney has been building here in Canada. The only difference? Canada is further along than most people realize.
So let's place Sanchez properly because he tends to get underestimated, and that turns out to be a big mistake. He's been Spain's prime minister since 2018. He's left of center. He survived multiple no-confidence votes, and he's still standing. And lately, the things he's saying out loud are the things that other Western leaders are only whispering in private.
Yep, what he just laid out this week is not just a speech, it was a framework. He called for Europe to, in his exact words, rearm itself morally. Now, that phrase, moral rearmament, let's dig into it a bit because it sounds like a big idea until you see exactly what he means.
So what he means is power without principle is worthless. You can have the biggest military budget in the world, but if you only apply the rules when they're convenient for you, or if you hold some countries accountable and give your friends a pass, then your so-called values are just theater, and everyone knows it.
Sound familiar? I think so. Now, his argument is that middle powers, countries like Spain and countries like Canada, can't win a contest of brute force with the United States or China. That's obvious. That is not the game we're in, though. What we can do is build credibility. Be the countries that actually mean what we say every time, to everyone, because credibility compounds. And it's the one thing that money and missiles can't buy away from you.
And here's what makes this more than one man's vision. The Spanish public is with them. A major political survey just came out of Spain, and the numbers were striking.
Yep, 51% of people in Spain now say they view Washington as a threat to Europe. Not a difficult partner, not an unreliable ally, a threat. And that's the majority of a country arriving at that word, not just one or two people.
Threat. And that it gets stronger. 94% said Europe needs to become more self-sufficient, even if that comes with real economic consequences. They're not just asking for a free lunch. They know what's going to happen. They say they are willing to pay for their own independence.
When 94% of a country agrees on something, you're not looking at a political opinion anymore. You're looking at a national decision and movement.
Now, these are not inconsequential numbers from a small, angry corner of Spain. This is where ordinary people have landed after years of watching the United States become more and more unpredictable. They become more transactional, more openly coercive under Trump, and everybody looked at Washington and they said, no, we don't want to do that.
And now, Sanchez is very specific about what sovereignty actually looks like in practice. Because sovereignty is one of those words that gets used constantly and sometimes means nothing. He refuses to leave it there.
Spain right now generates nearly 60% of its electricity from renewable sources, wind, solar, and hydro. So that's not an environmental talking point, that's a strategic decision.
And here's why that matters. Because when international energy prices spike, when there's a war, when there's a crisis, when some crazy leader decides to use oil or gas as a political weapon, we all know that sounds familiar because it's happening right now in the Strait of Hormuz. Well, while this is happening, Spain's power bills don't explode the way that other countries dependent on fuel imports do. They've insulated themselves. They did the work, and now they have some options.
Sanchez put it this way. A wind farm may not look as dramatic as a fighter jet, but if it keeps our country's lights on during a geopolitical crisis, if it's protecting our people from price shocks triggered halfway around the world, well, that is national defense. It's just wearing a different uniform and not carrying a gun.
Yeah. And Mark Carney, he's been making the same argument here in Canada. That resilience, real resilience, isn't built by cutting public capacity and hoping that private markets will sort it out. It's built through investment in energy infrastructure, in industrial capacity, in the alliances that give you leverage when the pressure does come. And guess what? The pressure has come, and Spain is holding.
The moral dimension of what Sanchez is doing is worth discussing a little bit more as well, because he doesn't just call for a stronger Europe, he calls for a consistent one. And consistency, as it turns out, is the hardest thing to build these days.
Yeah, he has been one of the most outspoken Western leaders on Gaza. Spain formally recognized a Palestinian statehood, and he has pushed for Netanyahu to be held to the same standards of international law as any other leader. And that's cost him. He's absorbed enormous amounts of political pressure from allies, from the USA, heck, even from Europe itself.
But his argument doesn't waver. If your moral framework only applies when it's comfortable for you, if you hold some leaders accountable and protect others because they're useful, then your framework is not real. It's not power, it's pure performance.
And performance doesn't build alliances. Performance doesn't earn trust. What earns trust, what actually gives you influence in the world, is showing up the same way every single time on every issue, regardless of who's watching and what other people are saying.
And you know what? That is what serious countries do. It's the only long game available to middle powers, and it's exactly what Sanchez and Prime Minister Carney are betting on.
Yeah, so here's where Canada actually becomes very important. And it's not a coincidence.
Last May, Carney and Sanchez spoke directly about expanding trade ties between our two countries. In September, they met again in London, and they deepened that conversation. By December, both governments formally stated a goal to double two-way trade between Canada and Spain.
And then, in March of this year, European Parliament members formally called for a stronger, broader EU-Canada partnership. That is the parliament of 27 nations, putting Canada's relationship with Europe on the agenda and making it a priority.
So if you follow the sequence, May, September, December, March, all of those are not coincidences. They are deliberate moves by two governments that have looked at the same map and they reached the same conclusion.
And that conclusion is this. In a world where you can no longer assume that the U.S. will act as a stable anchor, because obviously we know that ship has sailed, my friend. In a world where Trump has turned the U.S. power into something coercive and unpredictable, you have to build new relationships. You have to diversify. You have to create alliances that hold when that pressure comes.
And if that sounds too theoretical, like the kind of thing politicians say in a forum, and then everybody nods over tiny little sandwiches, well, the evidence is already sitting right in front of us. The breakdown between the United States and Canada is no longer subtle at all. It is measurable.
Yeah, we've seen it in polls after polls, showing just how badly Washington has torpedoed its relationship with Canada. Public trust is out the window. 43% of Canadians see the U.S. as mostly a threat to global stability, a 19-point lead over Russia. Up to 60% of Canadians feel that they can never trust Americans the same again, following ongoing disputes and, of course, the tariff war. The tone, it's changed. And once that kind of damage has set in, countries don't just complain about it, they start adjusting to it.
Which is exactly why Spain matters so much. Sanchez is not reacting to a hypothetical future. He's reacting to the same reality that Canada is already living through. We need to build more independence and take fewer risks on U.S. reliability. We are willing to accept that there's a cost to sovereignty and we'll pay for it anyway.
Yeah, you build, as Sanchez put it, architecture. Not true social posts, not photo ops, architecture. And remember, architecture lasts.
Now, some people will hear all of this and say, well, this is just posturing. Trump's not going to be here forever. And once he's gone, everything's just going to go back to normal. The old alliance, it'll reset. But you know what? We don't buy that, and here's why.
Yeah, when 51% of Spain calls Washington a threat and 94% say they will absorb real economic pain to become self-sufficient, that's a permanent shift. Public opinion that strong does not go in reverse when a new American president is sworn in. It compounds and it gets taught to the next generation.
We don't forget. And the same is true for what Sanchez has said about Europe's role. He named the reality out loud and said, We have been acting like a nervous assistant, and the people of Europe looked up and said, yeah, we have. You cannot unring that bell. It changes what every leader who comes after him can say and do.
So the lesson for Canada, the one we want to be really direct about here, is not break up with America tomorrow. That's just not reality. And that is not what Sanchez is saying anyway. What he's saying is stop building your entire future around a relationship that keeps throwing plates at the wall. Build something real and build something that actually holds.
And what Carney is doing with the alliances, the trade repositioning, the credibility work with Europe is exactly that. He's building something that holds across multiple alliances.
So Spain showed us something important. You don't need to be a hegemon to shape the conversation. You don't need nuclear weapons. You don't need the world's reserve currency. What you need is competence, you need consistent values, you need real alliances, and you need to show up.
And you know what? Canada has all of those things. And ever since Prime Minister Carney took office, we have a government that is choosing to use them deliberately, strategically, and unapologetically. What comes next is being decided right now by Sanchez in Spain, by Carney here in Canada, by the 94% of Spaniards who said, we will pay what it costs to stand on our own 2 feet. And Canada, we're being offered the same choice.
And the countries that make that choice clearly and actually act on it are going to matter for a very long time.
So here's our question for you. Spain is already at 60% renewables. They have a clear foreign policy position, and they're building real trade architecture with Canada. They're saying what most governments are afraid to say.
So is Canada moving fast enough to do the same? Knowing what Carney has started, knowing what Spain is already showing is possible, do you think Canada will be where Spain is in 5 years when it comes to renewable energy? Or are we still too comfortable with old habits to make the moves that matter?
Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to keep tracking how this unfolds and how Canada is navigating this brave new world, hit subscribe, like this video, and click on that bell because we put up new videos every single day.
And if you want to help support this channel, check the pinned comment down below for our merch store, join the A-Team, and our Substack where we go a little bit deeper on all of this.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and we shall see you right here tomorrow.